Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. Episode 101. Where No One Has Gone Before.
Welcome into another edition of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm Can Ray.
And my name you cannot pronounce in your limited human language.
What is it, Gaelic?
No, it's actually John Champion.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. I'm a little too influenced by The Traveler for this week's episode.
If you know us, you know what we do. Each week we get together and we do the thing with the thing. That is, we take apart an episode or a movie or something of Star Trek, take it apart for messages, morals, and meanings, and try to figure out whether the whole thing stands the test of time. This week, Where No One Has Gone Before.
Yeah, not to be confused with the original series episode Where No Man Has Gone Before, but we'll talk about that in
this
trivia.
This is not a Naked Time, Naked Now thing, is it?
No, not quite.
Hey,
not quite.
Speaking of trivia, it worked out so well last time. Are you cool if I actually if I take trivia this week?
Okay, well, when you say that it worked out well, I don't know exactly what you mean, but
I thought it went fantastically.
Sure.
I thought it was just absolutely great. No,
okay,
I mean,
sure,
you know how I am with, like, the whole it's stars and guest stars, and this guy was on that thing and that guy was on the other.
Yeah.
The Traveler just played absolutely beautifully this week by John Malkovich. I mean, really, probably one of his best, I think, outside of maybe Crimes of the Heart. Was he in Crimes of the Heart? And Con Air.
Right, yeah. or being John Malkovich.
Or being John Malkovich. Oh, yeah, he was in that, wasn't he? Yeah, So just a fantastic turn. And great to see him in the Star Trek things. I'm hoping to see him at a convention one day.
Ken, I'll need to take over trivia at this point, I'm afraid. That was not John Malkovich. That was actually a different actor, Eric Minyuk.
Really?
As the Traveler.
Okay, wait, I'm sorry. Well, we'll just do take two.
Okay.
The Traveler was played by renowned John Malkovich imitator, Eric Minyuk.
Yeah, he is good at that. Very, very good at that.
He actually does the road show of Mice and Men.
Oh, how nice.
Yeah.
Outside of that, we know very little about him. Now, he worked primarily as a TV guest actor from about 1986 to about 1998, and that's pretty much it. He auditioned for Data, which is kind of cool.
Wow.
And these days, he practices law in the state of California.
Really?
Yeah, he sure does.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Been hurt in an accident or a time travel incident?
you know what it's called. Call the offices of Eric Minyuk. Yes.
All right. So that's why I don't do trivia, by the way.
No, that is exactly why you don't do trivia.
One of the many reasons.
But I can see how you would make the mistake.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, this title is a takeoff from the original Where No Man Has Gone Before. This script was originally titled Where None Have Gone Before, and it was written by Diane Duane and Michael Reeves. Now let's talk about that title a little bit. Bob Justman wrote a very extensive and very picturesque description in an early memo about the opening titles of Star Trek The Next Generation. If you haven't gone to the Discovered Documents and seen some of Bob Justman's writing, he's great. And he's really funny, and he's really descriptive. So he was trying to bang out this idea of what the opening titles would look like for this new show. And this is way, way early in the process, early in 1987. He describes the planet flybys. He describes the angles that we'll see of the new Enterprise, the names on the screen. Of course, we didn't have the actors cast yet. And even Gene's special created by credit at the end and that hold on black. Now, he included the original narration, and he assumed that the familiar Star Trek TOS theme song would be used, even with the soprano vocals. The memo was circulated around the office with a few changes, but one thing that jumped out at Susan Sackett, that was Gene's assistant at the time, was the term Where No Man Has Gone Before. And she wrote a note on the memo that arrived in Gene's office that it would be a bit of a slap in the face to the 20-plus years of progressive Star Trek and a multitude of female fans if this wasn't corrected. So it got corrected. And ever since, it has been Where No One Has Gone Before. Now, the original phrase, Ken, we didn't talk about this when we did the original series coverage. The original phrase was drafted by Sam Peebles, who wrote the episode Where No Man Has Gone Before, but the opening credits were shot long after that episode had been finished. Gene wrote the original mission statement, and it was quite different. So here in this early TNG tradition of paying homage to TOS, we have a title that shares some phrasing with an original series title. Speaking of discovered documents, now I've pulled a few pages from an early draft of the script. This is the second draft, where Gene Roddenberry has his notes handwritten in the margins. I won't go into all of them here, but I think you'll see that, at least to me, the most interesting thing was his instincts that led to better storytelling. He immediately asks that the Traveler character be kept a mystery from the beginning. He corrects some of the formalities of the characters, and he is very sensitive to how the audience might perceive Wesley. So that's a good deal of his notes and how that relationship plays out and gets changed between that draft and what we saw on the screen. A couple of other things that did change. The Traveler did have a name early on. He was Hamalki, and even Gene didn't get that in his notes, and he wrote "who" next to one of his lines of dialogue. Thus, we end up with the old sci-fi trope, you couldn't pronounce my name in your language. A couple of other things during the dream sequences. I guess it was in the first draft or maybe even just in the story notes. One of the hallucinations would have been seeing Jack Crusher, but that got cut out relatively early on. And finally, there's an interesting bit of trivia here about a guest actor, Biff Yeager. He was cast as Argyle. And Argyle may have been a recurring character. He was the chief engineer, or one of the chief engineers that we have seen so far. And the story goes like this. He may have come across as a little too eager at the prospect of this being a recurring character. The production office started getting fan feedback about the show and about Yeager, except that some of that fan feedback had been written before the episode aired. And some of those letters that came to the production office mentioned that they were responding to the solicitation for opinion. This did not go over very well with some of the people in the executive office at Star Trek. So apparently what had been happening, Biff Yeager contacted fan groups, Star Trek fan clubs, and said, hey, I'm going to be on this show. Please write into the front office and let them know what you thought about the show, what you thought about me. They really want to hear your thoughts about Next Gen. And then all of a sudden, this flood of mail comes in, which they would get fan feedback anyway, but this stuff saying, we heard you wanted our opinion, so here you go. And this kind of surprised a lot of the executives. Biff Yeager was questioned about his actions, and he pointedly and apologetically wrote back that he merely asked for opinions, good and bad, about the show overall. And he does admit that he asked Star Trek fan clubs to do that. And they were all too happy to help him, assuming that this was a solicitation from the show itself. Long story short, Argyle only shows up in one more episode. So whether that was a result of this or just a change in how the character and actor structure would have been later, well, that one we don't actually know the answer to.
Biff's tale is a good one for me to hear this week. I was on the verge of saying that if you really like me and really want to help me out, you could send an email to missionlog@roddenberry.com and say something nice about the computer. Like how there should be more of her on the show. And how she could use a male counterpart.
Prologue. 5 episodes in, and we're already getting an upgrade. The Enterprise is welcoming aboard a couple of people who will make changes to the engines in order to make them run more efficiently. Riker is skeptical, but Picard doesn't see any harm in giving it a shot. Kosinski and his traveling alien assistant beam aboard. The alien, we will call him the Traveler, Kosinski will call a Class A assignee to the Enterprise. He brushes off Riker and Troy, then heads right to engineering. Troy confirms that Kosinski is a Dickens of a character. The Traveler is harder to read. She gets nothing from him, and that worries Riker. Act 1. Kosinski, who is acting like a total bastion of arrogance, tells Chief Engineer Argyle that he'll run his first test and don't worry about the fact that you don't understand the calculations. It just works, okay? Also, why is this kid here? You know, the kid? Well, Wesley is hanging out in engineering doing some schoolwork. While Kosinski is trying to dumb down the experiment with Riker and Argyle, the Traveler and Wesley start to chat. Wesley is intrigued by the Traveler's warp computations, and he thinks there might be some benefit to what they're proposing. The Traveler is pleased, intrigued by Wesley's grasp of a difficult concept. The first experiment is ready to begin. The Enterprise shoots away at warp 1.5, and all looks good until the Traveler becomes distracted for a moment. The engines pulse, and then he starts to fade away like he's one of Marty McFly's siblings in an old photograph. The Enterprise then blasts forward at enormous speed, passing galaxies and a Pink Floyd laser light show. When Picard calls for a reverse, they realize they are very far away, on the other side of the M33 galaxy. In other words, so far from home that it would take over 300 years at maximum warp to get back, or even a message more than 50 years to get back. Act 2. Kosinski, who is still kind of a prickly guy to get along with, bounds onto the bridge, all smiles and ready to tell Picard that he is practically a hero for taking them farther, faster than anybody anywhere. The others just want to figure out how to get home. The Traveler and Wesley have a chat. Wesley sees right through that Kosinski is a cocksure joke, and that the Traveler is doing some really out-there calculations that merge time, space, and thought. The Traveler tells him to forget it. You're too young, and this is nonsense that your world isn't ready for. Picard asks Kosinski if he can repeat the experiment. It would be nice to explore, but they really need to know that they can get home, that this isn't just some fluke. With all of his confidence intact, Kosinski returns to engineering to enlist the help of his assistant to do it again. The Traveler looks a bit weary, and when Wesley tries to bring Riker up to speed, he just gets brushed aside. A course is laid in, the engines rev up, and the Traveler starts phasing out again. But this time, Riker sees it too. Galaxy after galaxy zooms by, and the Enterprise comes to a stop. But where? We have no idea. Swirling light, strange colors. Data nails it when he reports that they are where none have gone before. Act 3. We're going to have a much longer trip back home. The new position puts the Enterprise more than 1 billion light years from Earth. I hope somebody brought some extra sandwiches for the trip. When Picard decides to go to engineering, things start to get weird. The captain sees himself walking through a turbolift door and almost falling into empty space. Worf sees his pet Targ from childhood. Yara sees her cat and then imagines herself running from a rape gang on her home planet. Others on the Enterprise envision themselves as musicians, dancers, running from a monster. Picard imagines he sees his mother dropping in for a cup of tea, but she's not there, and Riker escorts him finally to engineering. Red Alert is called, and Picard addresses the crew. He's figured out that where they are, this place in the universe somehow makes real whatever they imagine. They need to stop imagining, crazy stuff. Just be cool, and we'll get out of this. Maybe. The situation in engineering is dire. Kosinski comes clean as the fake he is. Honestly, he thought he was doing something, but all along it was the Traveler. And the Traveler's situation is bad. Wesley explains that he, the Traveler, has been phasing in and out of existence. Now he's out cold and being examined by Dr. Crusher. If he can't help them, then they are trapped. Act 4. In sickbay, Dr. Crusher has little idea how to treat her patient. She can wake him, though it's dangerous. Picard orders it, and a hypo brings the Traveler back to consciousness. He tries to explain to Picard what's going on. He's just an explorer, a traveler who wants to see the universe, and he's catching rides on Federation starships when he can. Kosinski is just a tool, his tool, to help him do it. He means no harm, really. Where they are is indeed a long way from Earth, but what's happening is a little harder to explain. The traveler is mixing thought with time and space. Thought is what got them where they are now. Conventional warp engines won't do. The traveler is like a lens to focus thought and manifest changes in reality. Kosinski doesn't get it. Picard does. At least he gets it enough. The traveler goes on to explain that in the human's limited understanding, he's from a different time, definitely a different place, and the humans should not even be here until the far future when they have better control over their own thoughts. His people travel everywhere, but until now, there was nothing of interest for the humans to offer. Picard is willing to give the traveler another shot in engineering. He knows that is their only way out. But before he returns, the alien wants a word with Picard in private. Wesley is special, the traveler explains. Like Mozart was with music, Wesley will be with physics. Encourage him, help him, but don't tell him about this chat. We don't want all that to go to his head now, do we? The traveler has had a lot taken out of him, but time is running out, and he'll need to get back to the computer and engineering right away. Act 5. No idea where or when they are, the next warp experiment to return home begins. Only this time, Picard gives a unique order. Because thought has such an impact on their situation, he commands that every crew member concentrate on either their duty or on the well-being of the traveler. The ship leaps away, the light show begins again, and the traveler, after manning the computer, disappears. With the Enterprise back where it belongs, Picard invites Wesley to the bridge. Acknowledging his contribution during their time with the traveler, Picard gives the boy the rank of acting ensign and, for a moment, a seat on the bridge. The end.
You're always very good about saying when I do a good job. I gotta say, people probably hear it, but I want to go ahead and acknowledge it. John's feeling a bit under the weather today. So very well done, especially given that.
Thank you.
I do want to encourage people not to send chicken soup because by the time they hear this,
it could make me even worse.
Right. And that's just if it gets there in a couple of days. People listening like 2 years from now, if you're thinking, I should send John something. No, be like the traveler or be like the people around the traveler. Just send him well wishes wherever he is. And then that little boost you feel in your step, John.
Yeah.
That could be somebody listening to the podcast 10 years from now for the first time going, I hope he's okay.
That's really cool.
That's sending really good thoughts.
Nice. Yeah.
It would be kind of cool. I know you don't believe in that kind of thing, but still.
Yeah, well, we'll find that out toward the end of the show, won't we now?
Well, I'm not talking about this episode. Anyway. Let's get to the important stuff, because there's one thing that's been vexing me this whole time. They're 300 light years away. It's going to take 51 years to get a message to Starfleet. They send off the message. Then they end up back in our space and time. Do you think they let Starfleet know that there's going to be a weird message on the way?
Right.
By the way, in 51 years, you're going to get a distress call from 2 galaxies away. It's going to sound like me, mostly because it was or will be or is, depending on how you feel about that whole space-time thing.
Right.
But ignore it, because we're fine. And we'll either be fine or dead 51 years from now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is really odd, and you can't unsend.
No, you can't.
Something that has been sent like that. But
the other possibility, forgive me, we may have a plot point for Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Yeah, very true. That whole thing, though, did make me think about the idea of subspace as a thing and as a way of sending a message. I mean, here we are in this future in the 24th century where we've got warp speed just everywhere. We can get to all these places. There are still limits. We know that it takes a certain amount of time to get from point A to point B. But the idea here is that you still have to have a ship to go out and do things, and that ship has to have people on it to negotiate, to bring supplies, to explore, to do whatever they're doing, even though a subspace message travels much faster. The idea that I could be on Earth and I could send a subspace message way, way faster than warp speed, hopefully take care of a problem that requires negotiation. But some things just still require a person to be there, even if it takes longer for that person to get there.
Can I? Oh, see. Mind scan. I would suggest Mind Scan by our friend Robert J. Sawyer.
Oh.
And I don't want to say anything more about why I'm saying that based on what you just said, although people might be able to infer something, but they won't know for certain. May I suggest Mind Scan by Robert J. Sawyer? For a number of reasons. It also deals with, uploading consciousness into robots, and who doesn't love that? Am I right?
Hey, yeah. I know somebody who loves that.
I know who's got two thumbs, and, well, actually, but anyway, me, yep. I guess that's what I was trying to say.
Right. Yeah, all right. Well, we will hope that people will check that out for sure.
No, I meant you.
Oh, well, I will check that out too.
But
I will check that out too.
Yeah, because you and I need to have we got to figure out what to do after this Star Trek and moonlighting business. So the collected works of Robert J. Sawyer may be our podcast in 2027.
Nice. I like that. Now let's talk about a moment here where Deanna reads Kosinski right away. And we didn't need Deanna to read Kosinski because everybody in the audience could read Kosinski right away.
Right.
I get why she's helpful on board, generally speaking, because if you are faced with an alien, in Farpoint, we saw that very well, where she could sense the idea that there was an emotional consciousness at work there, not just an alien craft.
Right.
But it really did make me wonder again about where the lines are drawn with her powers. She read Yar in Code of Honor and outed her to the captain. The captain's standing right there.
She did not out her to the captain. She let Tasha do it.
Well, yeah, but it was uncomfortable. Even Tasha said, how dare you?
Yeah. Well, I think that's the uneven writing around Tasha, but we'll get to that in a bit.
Maybe. Now Kosinski is not a Starfleet officer, but we're just sort of making assumptions about him. He's a guy who is assigned by Starfleet. He shows up. We've gotten his pedigree from the other two ships that he's worked on so far. So we assume that he's there for good reason, and we assume they're going to learn what his skills are.
Right.
But still, Deanna is there saying, I wouldn't trust this guy. Are there other counselors with these powers on other ships? And if not, does that give an unfair advantage to the Enterprise? Is it just an unfair bit of, I don't know, overreach on the side of the Enterprise when you have somebody who can read an emotional state, potentially read a mind of someone else?
There's no reason to think, though, that the Vulcans wouldn't have been able to do that, but are you going to keep putting a Vulcan on every ship?
Right.
I mean, I would think that a finely tuned Vulcan, go back to the motion picture. Mm-hmm. There's an intelligence that nobody has ever encountered before. Nobody has even encountered its like before. Mm-hmm. But a well-tuned Vulcan or half Vulcan, and there may actually be something to the whole half part of it, right? Because Troy's not Beta Z, she's half Beta Z, right? Or Betazoid, whichever. Right. She's only half that. So, maybe it's there may be an inherent thing about, the combination, the whole idic thing of, hey, humanity plus this equals something kind of awesome.
Yeah.
As far as I know, Deanna is not, because she's only half, she's not able to actually read minds. She's able to sense. And, honestly, a good person can do that. A dog can do that, for crying out loud. So, it's just something that reads very well to her, or very quickly to her. So,
and Kosinski gives you no room for a misinterpretation.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, anybody could have done that. Anybody. Yeah. Yes, because he was, he kind of wore that on his sleeve. He's great in the crisis, though, I will say. Things go bad, and he just, puts his elbows on his desk and wrings his hands. That was really kind of amazing. While everybody else is like, we got to do something. Kosinski's like, they're going to find out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not even pretending to push pretend buttons. Just, wow. That's it. That's all he's got.
And he doesn't even, like I said, he's not a ranking officer.
Well, can we go back for a second? Why do you keep saying that? Because he is wearing a uniform.
He's wearing a uniform, but it has no Starfleet badge. It has no rank insignia on it. And they always just refer to him as Mr. Kosinski.
Oh,
he's not lieutenant. He's not captain. He's not commander. He's just sort of a guy. and he's gotten assigned. So, but it makes sense. Like, there were people in my family who were, who worked for the Army, who worked for the military, but they were civilians. Mm-hmm. But they, their pay grade would be at a certain rank. So you have the equivalent position, but they are civilians. They are not military.
Did they wear uniforms?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
No, not that I know of.
All right. Yeah. That's confusing. It didn't even occur to me that he actually didn't have a rank until, you were just saying it just now, because he shows up in the engineering gold, right? Or Command Gold, actually. It's Command Gold now that I think about it, isn't it?
Command Red, no.
A Command changed to red. Okay, from Gold. But then Geordi wears red when he's in engineering.
Geordi's going to change.
He changes to gold?
He will change to red.
Wow.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
No, he's wearing red now.
That's right.
Somebody needs to draw me a chart.
Yeah.
Preferably of how the color coding works. And it's 3 colors. It's primary colors. And still I'm sitting here going, wait a minute, what is green for?
Yeah.
There actually isn't one. Hey, speaking of engineering.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love your line. Forgive me, I'm going to steal your line because I started it. Being the chief engineer of the Enterprise D is looking more and more like the drummer of Spinal Tap.
Yes,
That's so awesome.
Keep an engineer.
Yeah, except we never hear how any of these engineers go away. They just go away. I mean, like we heard pretty graphically actually how the drummers of Spinal Tap died.
Right.
No, I don't. One thing I don't remember though were Mick Shrimpton and the boys, Stumpy Joe Dorita. All the drummers for Spinal Tap, and those are the only 2 I can name, unfortunately. Ed Bigley Jr. I know played one, not either of those, but were they all Scottish? Because all of the engineers up until when Mr. LaForge becomes engineer, and I shouldn't say up until that point, but we've had Montgomery Scott, we had and I remember her name just because now we're talking about it, McDougal, Chief Engineer McDougal.
Yeah.
Shimoda doesn't count because he was never Chief Engineer.
Right.
And then Argyle, the man's name is Argyle, for crying out loud. Could you be more Scottish? I mean, without calling him Scotty, which was already taken. Right. Yeah. Lieutenant Edinburgh, report to the bridge. Really? Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I don't know what that's about. See, I would have gone German. They're an engineering people. I'm just saying, I would have totally gone. I would have gone German.
They are, but there is the whole thing about Scots being engineers as well. And that was part of the thing with James Doohan coming in and auditioning with a bunch of different accents. And they said, oh, no, Scottish, that's the one to do because Scots invented the steam engine. So there you go. So they have the history of engiering as well. And by the way...
Was the first Enterprise steam-powered? I didn't realize.
Yeah, yes, it was.
Oh, wow, far out.
If you didn't know that.
Early steampunk.
Right. And by the way, because I know that we'll get letters on it, yes, Geordi goes from red to gold. So
does he really?
Yeah, he does.
I just do not remember that at all. I'm so glad I'm finally watching Star Trek: The Next Generation.
But again, isn't that what's cool about this? We get to go in order and we get to discover things as they happen.
Yeah, that's true.
So there you go. I really liked the 2001: A Space Odyssey kind of homage that we see in exploring the deepest parts of the universe. And I say that seriously. I mean, I know. When you get to the third act of 2001 and it is the beyond, I thought that was cool here. It played out well.
Yeah, my problem is I still can't see anything but an ELO video.
Well, I love ELO. So,
I do too. And they they honestly use some effects that seem a little bit the same.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, because it got cheaper after that was 68, right? Was 2001.
Yep.
Yeah. So by the mid to late 70s, you get those effects in your breakfast cereal.
That's right. And at the local planetarium show.
Exactly.
But it is cool that they put a number on it. And they say that by this time in Star Trek, we have charted 11% of our galaxy.
Yeah.
I thought that was neat just because they put a number on it and they said, wow, the galaxy is so huge. And by inference, the universe is so huge. We are just a tiny, insignificant part of that. You know.
You don't think it's just that we keep getting distracted, do you?
Well,
and we actually could have done more than 11%, but
right.
Captain's log, we're back at the shore leave planet. I don't know what it is about this place, but there's just something.
Right.
I don't know if that would be it or not.
I thought it was interesting that Riker was ready to defend Wesley at one point. But as soon as Wesley is trying to break down what's really going on, then he's like, I don't have time for this kid.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That was like at the beginning, Riker was ready. He was like, oh, no, Wesley's great. Just leave him there.
That was a little incongruous, honestly. Yeah. But it's okay because it needed to happen for the episode. I got to say, I like the way, and we're going to come back to this discussion much later in the show, but I like the way the relationship is developing between Riker and Picard. I mean, there's no all due respect, Captain, in this episode. I mean, it opens up with Picard going, well, now, what are you talking about? And Riker's like, well, I'm talking about this. And Picard's like, all right, fair. Go talk to him. I mean, there's no. I mean, we're only 5 episodes in, I think you said, but there's. Yeah. I mean, we're starting to establish that familiarity. We're starting to establish that working relationship in ways that even though it's still a new crew, even though it's still a new series, we're kind of in it at this point, which is great to see. I mean, as opposed to just the constant explanation of, well, it's early and I don't know you and we had this thing and it's like, nah, another day at the office. Let's get to it. I really sort of appreciated that.
We got a good piece of listener email from somebody who had been in the military, and he was talking about our reaction to Picard's original sort of hazing of Riker in Encounter at Farpoint, because you and I both were like, whoa, he's being a little rough here, not even making eye contact and all this. And our listener wrote in to say, well, this is a pretty common military thing, especially among the executive officer level, because it's like testing, where are your loyalties? What are your priorities? And I get all of that. Makes absolute sense. But then I also question, well, in this quasi-military, but still very enlightened, very different sort of future, different kind of humanity, do we still do that, or do we maybe approach it a little differently?
I think we would still kind of do it the same way because of, you say quasi-military. There are, I mean, in Kirk's time there were 430, I think it was, on the Enterprise. Now there are over 1,000 people, and now there are women and children. I mean, spouses, not even people necessarily who are serving, but just, hey, can I bring my wife and kid to work, for the next however many years, wherever we're going? Yeah. And Federation's like, yeah, sure. I mean, there's still a tremendous amount of responsibility. One might even say more responsibility on Picard. It was a fascinating. I was blown away, and I've seen the clip before. Where he's coming off the turbo lift and he almost steps into space. Yeah, that like blew my mind this time because I was actually really watching it and paying a whole lot more attention. It says so much about who this guy is and the weight that he carries on a daily basis. The door opens from the turbo lift, and he is faced with the vast inky abyss that is space. And there is literally nothing between that nothing and his ship except for him. Now, you could maybe say it's taken an awful lot of responsibility on yourself. Right. But I mean, he is in charge of all of these people, and the thin membrane between, nothing and families and kids and exploring and all that stuff is the command of Jean-Luc Picard. That was just incredibly stunning to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, think of it again, what we have seen in the early episodes where everybody is ready to pull out a phaser at the drop of a hat. They're ready to fight. And it takes Picard, it takes his wherewithal to say, no, that's not what we do. We're going to talk this out. We're going to work it out.
What are you going to do? Shoot the television? Seriously?
Yeah. But then when he has that hallucination, which is, like I said, stunning, and it speaks to who he is, the next hallucination that he has, his reaction is different. Everybody else is so freaked out and they think it's real. When he sees his mother, Maman, he stops to talk to say, can you explain what's going on with my ship?
Right.
So he's ready to engage the hallucination as if this is an intelligence that is responsible for what's going on. I thought that was kind of cool, rather than just being sucked into the moment, as everybody else was. So again, it kind of creates this separation between his sort of intellectual fortitude, his perspective, and everybody else.
Well, he was sucked into the moment, but he was willing to use that time.
Yeah.
I mean, as opposed to the guy who's like standing there because he's behind a wall of fire, or the person who's running from, or the two people that are running from whatever monster it is that is chasing them that he doesn't see, and points to him. I mean, somebody else, he might have bumped into somebody else. Those two people rather might have bumped into somebody else and assume that they were seeing the same thing as well. Picard's like, there's nothing there. That's going to be, that's his default position. Right. There's not a monster on the ship. So for him, there's no monster on the ship. What his mom was doing there is a whole other thing. But then the fact that he's willing to, like you say, I mean, even approaching madness, he can go, all right, so what's really happening here? And kind of use that as interesting. I do have to ask, though, as far as the hallucination stuff goes, were the writers trying to screw up the character of Tasha Yar from the beginning? And I don't believe they actually are, but man, just nobody can get a handle on how to handle this character. Yeah. Worf thinks about his childhood pet, and quick aside, what's going on in that Klingon head that this fierce warrior, second in line for security chief, right? On the bridge of the Enterprise, one of the top ships of the fleet, the ship that is now 300 light years from home.
Yeah, right.
What is going on in his head that he's thinking about his childhood pet?
Well, I do know for a fact that ribs of Targ are delicious, so he might have been hungry.
He's not going to eat. That's his childhood pet. That'd be like a Spock killing a Chaya because he was hungry one day, as opposed to because there was a problem. Although I hear Salat or Salat, depending on whether you're in the north or south of Vulcan, also very tasty.
Right.
Here's the thing, though. So he's thinking about his childhood pet, right? And it's like, for people who haven't seen it for some reason, picture a pig, but now put a lot of fur on it, and now put big spikes on it.
Wait. Not unlike a unicorn dog.
Not unlike a dog in a unicorn costume. Honestly, I thought that they had done that again, and I was going to be so happy. But then when it was obviously a pig, I was like, oh, because if it had been a dog in a unicorn costume, I would have been like, can I please do the recap this week, please? Right. But, it wasn't. It was a pig in a stegosaur costume. Mm-hmm. So Yar then, so Worf is like, oh, it's this is my pet, but it is my childhood pet.
Yeah.
And Yar says, oh, you mean like a kitty cat? Well, no, because it's a pig with big spiky things. Right. And unless you're talking about a Salat or an electric cat. No, nothing like a kitty cat, actually. But Worf says yes, because the whole thing is actually just to get her to the part where she is then standing with her childhood pet and then about to be pursued by a rape king. Yeah. It does show the horror of her planet. And I understand it's a quick way to get there. But man alive, there's got to be an intelligent way to do that. I mean, even just saying, oh, a childhood pet. Yeah, I mean, even that would have done it. Even that at that point, then her cat jumps down. It feels like they are just... It's like every writer was allergic to the Tasha Yar character for some reason. And they like broke out in something if they had to spend more than 10 seconds thinking about something intelligent for her to say. And so they just gave up on it, made her either yell something or say something stupid and then go on to the next scene.
Well, here's the thing. We've gotten a lot of feedback from people talking about Yar and kind of our coverage and trying to understand her. And I really feel like just from a writing point of view, I think you've probably nailed it with your description. I think that when you start to build a character breakdown and you go through and you say, okay, here's what Picard is like, and then you get an actor like Patrick Stewart to come in and read and you go, oh yeah, and that's exactly what he sounds like, we're off and running. Mm-hmm. With Yar, you have a little bit of a character background that says she's tough, she's in this role as chief of security, and here's her terrible, broken background to try to explain a little bit of where she's coming from. And you sort of have enough of that on the page, and then you stop. But you don't really know what to do with that when it comes to expressing that on screen. It's a very, very difficult thing. And I feel like if it's not an outright sabotage of the character, it's almost like the writers painted themselves into a corner with her. So you have this little bit of information or background, not a whole lot to do with her on screen. So then you end up with what we ended up with here.
And that feels terrible because I have always heard her character sort of derided. And I watched the first season of Star Trek The Next Generation when it was on originally, and I've caught reruns again since, but I've never really had a strong feeling about her either way. Honestly, I found Denise Crosby an attractive woman, and I was sort of like, bummer, because I was a 17-year-old boy. So, that's largely what was on my mind when I was watching Star Trek The Next Generation the first time around. Going back, though, I mean, it feels like I feel like the actress was mistreated, and I feel like the character was mistreated. And I don't mean in a harassment sort of way or anything like that. It's just sort of like, yes, she is the most cardboard character of all of them, and we've still gotten some pretty cardboard stuff from these characters to this point. Yeah, but I feel like a whole lot was. I don't know, unless there's like some weird sort of like time paradox, whatever, where her character could change drastically. I feel like there's little hope.
And by the way, let's make very clear that we are talking about the character of Tasha Yar because Denise Crosby is awesome. And the few times that I've met and chatted with her, she is great. But in what we're doing here with Mission Log, just trying to pick apart the nuances, the characters, all that. This is a character that, because of the writing, is just not working.
Right.
And that gets expressed here in that scene. So far.
Now we are only, 5 or 6 episodes into the Next Generation at this point. So, I mean, it may actually... It may get better. It may change. I seriously, honestly, people who have listened to the show for any length of time know I do not remember.
Right.
But so far, it's not working out.
Let's change gears here just a little bit. Would the whole imagination thing affect Data?
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Well, he could get drunk. I'm sorry. I was trying to hear what you were saying. Would it affect Data?
Yeah.
I don't know. I would think maybe, since he was affected the same way in The Naked Now, but also Data would definitely be disciplined enough, Data would be disciplined enough to not have his thoughts wander. What I was actually curious about was telling people to control their thoughts the best way to go. Like should Picard instead have, set everybody on, menial, mindless, dumb tasks? I was just walking through a crewman's quarters, and it was a disgrace. So everybody back to your quarters and clean. I want you to scrub. I'm going to issue toothbrushes to everybody and seriously get down and get the corners. I mean, do you want to give them some sort of mindless task? Because when you tell everybody, listen, everyone, don't whistle, hum, or even think about Pop Goes the Weasel.
Right.
Guess what all of our listeners are doing right now, by the way. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if the ship's fate depends on people not whistling, singing, humming, or even thinking about Pop Goes the Weasel, and you tell them, okay, so seriously, don't do that because we could all die, they all die.
Yeah.
And so telling everybody, no, really control your thoughts because, maybe Riker didn't watch Shore Leave.
Right.
Because we do know that he watches Star Trek reruns. Maybe he didn't watch Shore Leave because, that whole thing of control your thoughts. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it doesn't usually work, especially when you tell people, no, seriously, control your thoughts.
I might want to come back to that Data thing in a moment because I might have just thought through a way that this affects my perception of this show and the premise of the show. So I want to table that for just a moment. There's a scene that I have to mention. The line referring to the Traveler, he seems to have developed some kind of attachment to the boy. That's Riker. And then Wesley chimes in, my name is Wesley, Commander Riker. Can I just say, damn?
I don't know if you're allowed to say that on Mission Log, but I guess you have, so sure.
I just did, yeah.
I know. I kind of like the fact that he stood up for himself, honestly. And I like the fact that Picard was like, yeah, he knows. Okay, we all know. I mean, he does acknowledge halfway through it, I am being kind of a jerk to this kid, and maybe I won't be. But yeah, everybody all through the episode, it was actually weird how even if we tend to treat children in a more enlightened way in the 24th century, we're also cool if people don't. What's that child doing here? That's the first thing Kosinski says when he gets to engineering. What's that child doing here? And referring to him as boy, and nobody says it's actually only when somebody that Wesley knows is demeaning him. Yeah. I mean, I guess he's willing to take a certain amount of guff from outsiders, but from people who should know better, he expects more. Well, it's kind of interesting. He stood up for not only for himself, but also, reminding Riker, not to be a Kosinski.
Right. But, here's the thing. Say what you will about Wesley. The moment at the end of him getting commissioned is wonderful.
It is.
It's great. It's a terrific, real moment. It hinges upon the Picard and Riker dialogue. It's not so much about Wesley's reaction. It's about the way they treat it, of course. I did kind of wonder, though, here's this weirdo kid with his voice synthesizer of Picard, as we found out. And I just wonder, could they just put him in a holodeck simulation for training? Yeah. Maybe the whole commissioning was just a holodeck thing.
Yeah. How is Yar not yelling about this? Was it not just 3 weeks ago that he took over the ship?
Right.
Captain, I must agree. We should fire on Wesley.
I am truly glad I did not encourage you to write to missionlog@roddenberry.com to say something nice about the computer. To do so might be seen as overstepping my bounds. So, this is me, not encouraging you to write to missionlog@roddenberry.com to say something nice about the computer.
So I find it interesting that you say Kosinski does not have a rank because he is wearing a uniform. It's quite possible that he has an honorary ambassadorship.
Because
maybe an honorary admiralty.
Yeah. We've learned anything about the upper echelon of Starfleet. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Promote them out of the way. But then if they ever are on your ship, just know you're going to be dealing with a little bit of stuff. Maybe they don't even bother calling him Admiral whatever, though, or Ambassador whatever, because he wears it on his sleeve, as you pointed out.
Yeah, and that's
despite
one of the,
not having it on his sleeve. Actually, now that I think about
it. Right. That is one of the things that I kind of didn't get about creating the character that way. Mm-hmm. On the one hand, I like the idea of somebody who does come in and totally shake things up, because so far we have a very functional crew. Mm-hmm. Everybody's a good guy, and even if you and I kind of take our shots at Tasha, everybody is functional. Everybody does a good job.
Everybody's even fully functional, as far as we know.
Oh, hey, watch out!
Hello.
But we're behind them. We're rooting for them. And Kosinski, we just don't.
Yeah.
And it's interesting also that he is a fraud. So you make this guy a jerk, but you also make him a fraud. Although he doesn't understand that he is a fraud. Mm-hmm. He doesn't understand that until the end. That the Traveler is actually the one doing all the work. But why should Kosinski be a jerk about the whole thing? He and the Traveler get along. Mm-hmm. The Traveler seems perfectly willing to work with this guy. Right. And he's not there under duress.
Well, the Traveler is his backstage pass. I mean, of course the Traveler is going to work with him, because the Traveler is how he gets on board the Enterprise. Mm-hmm. Now, why the Traveler? I mean, I know there's the whole thing about, well, humans haven't been interesting to this point that they mentioned, but I mean, why the Traveler doesn't, talk to anybody in the Federation or talk to anybody in Starfleet?
Well, yeah, and that's what I don't get, because the Traveler could just say to Kosinski, look, it's not you, it's me. I want to see other Starfleet crew members, so I want to go introduce myself.
Maybe people who are a tiny bit nicer than you are.
Right.
I would argue, Kosinski, I would argue, is just compensating. I mean, he just is. I mean, you say he doesn't know that he is a fraud. I think he suspects that he is, though. And so I think he's just sort of, I think he's blustering his way through stuff because it's much easier, right? Mm-hmm. If he has to explain, because here's the thing. So he gets to the Enterprise and Argyle and Riker are like, so explain this to me. And Kosinski's like, no.
Right.
And he's done this on 2 other ships. And you get the sense that worked for him on the other 2 ships. Again, we're led to believe we're dealing with an exceptional crew when we're dealing with the Enterprise, although it's a little bit scary. So are you telling me then that the captains and first officers of other crews are like, so tell me what you can do with my engines?
Yeah, I do not want to be on the USS Fearless.
No, you don't. Well, they are fearless, so maybe that's it. Can you tell me what you're doing with the engines? No. Well, that's fine.
Just go right ahead.
What do I care? I have no... what's that thing? I don't even know a word for it. That thing where you're kind of worried, but you're not worried, and you're maybe I'll think of it sometime. Anyway, take over the Fearless. I'll be in my bunk. Yeah, I mean, I assume that he's compensating, and whether he's doing that, whether that is to throw everybody off the fact that he doesn't know what he's doing, or whether that's to throw himself off the fact that he doesn't know what he's doing. He knows on some level that nothing that he's doing really should work, except he believes it will. Now, try that in, Iowa, where they seem to maybe sometimes build starships, sometimes they don't. Mm-hmm. Try that on Earth, and that's not so much going to work for you unless you happen to be sitting next to a guy who can do that, a.k.a. the Traveler, right?
Right.
I think it's partly blocking everybody else and partly blocking himself because, you tear down that wall. Come on, you've met people like that, haven't you? They're going to make it because they're going to make it. But sure. They don't really have the talent. They don't really have the skill. And yet, look at that. There's that person's name up in lights for seemingly no better reason than they always knew they were going to, so they did.
Well, but he's got the other guy here to exploit. But the other guy is smarter and nicer. And all it takes is the other guy to start chatting with the crew. Right.
Well, but the other guy's doing it on the down low because, we don't know anything about the Travelers at this point. He does say that there are more people like him.
Yeah.
I mean, it's possible that they are, draw that out for a second. Okay, so we weren't interesting to you before, and now we are. So why didn't you say hey?
Right.
Well, it's possible because, last time we said hey to a race about your size and about your shape and about your color and about your technological level, we were hunted out of existence. I mean, we really don't know. We don't know what's going on with this guy. He's got decent reasons to keep it quiet. I do think maybe Wesley should have made a little bit more noise when the guy literally starts blinking out of existence in front of him.
Sure. If they're not going to listen to him, just, write it down, send a message.
Come on, you've got a pad. Are you telling me that thing doesn't have a camera?
Right.
Snap a pic really quick and say, here, okay, so here he is, and here he's not. And that was like a half a second apart.
Think about it, though, in the past, when we were looking at TOS, all the very powerful, very well-intentioned aliens that needed the help of the original crew, needed the help of the Enterprise, needed the help of James Kirk, but rather than asking, they just took over. Mm-hmm. By any other name is, there are certain parallels between that episode and this episode, because the aliens take over, they dehydrate the crew, and they're just like, well, we're going to take off and we're going to go 300 light years away, and there's nothing you can do about it. And at the end of that, Kirk says, look, all you had to do is ask. We will help you in whatever way we can. This is just not a good way to help you.
Well, the problem, though, is we're 80 years later than Kirk at this point. We haven't learned a whole lot about Starfleet yet. And honestly, this does not bode well. The fact that they're like, oh, by the way, there's this guy, kind of difficult, but he's going to take over your ship. So let him. Mm-hmm. He's going to, your brand new engines, he's going to do something. He won't really tell us what, but it seems to work. So go to it. Or let him go to it, actually. You get out of his way. We don't know anything about Starfleet, really, at this point, except that it's the same organization years later.
Yeah, but the scientific method is the same. Bring the guy to Earth, run some tests, run more tests. Don't implement that on a ship.
How did he do it the first time? That's the question. How did he get somebody? No, seriously, it's going to work. Are you sure? Well, no. But let me try.
Maybe the problem here is summed up in this line. I forget who it is that poses it to Picard. Maybe it is Riker. Can you allow a man who has made a mistake back into a position where he can make another?
It's Worf who says that.
Oh, it is Worf. That's right. Yeah. Well, maybe this is where they keep getting themselves in trouble. We'll just give him one more chance.
Well, no, he did it fine the first two times, though. I mean, there were two other ships that he's done this with, and it's been okay. How it was he was allowed to do it with that first ship is kind of the puzzle. Yeah. Unless he had a smaller, like a runabout or something that had warp. Oh, man, what a geek I
am. Well done, Ken.
Oh, man.
Yep.
You had a question about Data.
Yeah. Well, I like the idea that Data's impulse is to explore where they are. Mm-hmm. They get out to this place way beyond, what do you say, 1 billion light years from Earth, and Data's like, you should have a look around. No,
once they were 1 billion light years from Earth, he was on board with everybody going back. It's when they were 300 million light years away.
300 million, 1 billion, at that point.
Or however much it was. No,
long way to get home.
It wasn't even 300 million light years away. It was going to take 300 years to get back, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see, they're 2 galaxies away, and Data's like, we should totally look around. Easy for him. He's going to live 300 years, like going back 300 years. He's looking ahead 300 years, probably on a nanosecond by nanosecond basis, going, oh, yeah, I'll be fine. So, I mean, for him to go, let's poke around a bit, because what? It's only going to take 300 years to... Oh, that might be a problem for you, though, huh? Right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it seems to me, and it's very nice when Picard says of Data's suggestion, spoken like a true Starfleet graduate.
Yeah.
Except, again, spoken like a true Starfleet graduate who's going to live like 500 years, maybe more.
Right.
What with this whole robot body thing, right?
Definitely, yeah.
Exactly. So, for him, it'd be like at the end of the 300 years, boy, do I have a story to tell. But first, I would really like to stretch my legs.
Right.
Because I've been flying for, 300 years now.
But it was neat. I mean, you would think that everybody else on the Enterprise, they're probably freaked out, but Picard could just as easily have made an announcement to say, all right, everybody, we're here. Gather as much data as you can, because this might be useful one day. We don't know when.
That's true.
Hundreds of years from now, but do your jobs.
Not even taking pictures for 24 hours.
Yeah, right.
It does strike me as kind of odd. It's like, oh, we're outside. I want to be inside. Mm-hmm. Oh, but come on, you've never been outside before. Yeah, and maybe we'll send other people to go outside one day. But right now, I'd like to go back in, please.
Yeah, but Picard does see value in getting home so that Kosinski's formula can be used on a real scientific vessel with a real scientific mission, so that he concedes that much. And Kosinski, I thought, had a great point that mankind's achievements have been linked with speed. Many of them, not all of them, but yeah, he's right. Yeah, cars that go faster and faster, rockets that go to the moon, and absolutely, breaking of the sound barrier by Chuck Yeager, all that stuff, absolutely. So here's where I wanted to come back to the Data thing. When I asked, with the whole imagining what becomes real thing that happens to our crew, would that affect Data, or would Data have an effect on reality? So I guess the place that becomes weird for me is, well, first of all, you have the idea that an android would have an imagination,
right?
That it would have abstract thought and be able to say, like, now I see a cat, now I see a targ, now I see this. I assume that his positronic brain does not work the same way that ours does, with random ideas, images, all firing synapses. But I guess the other thing that really made me think about this, and I think we'll talk about this in our wrap-up, the premise of thought having such an effect on physical reality. When you say that, you then have to assume that there is a mechanism for that to happen. That a human brain, and we'll assume for a moment that the Traveler has at least enough in common in his physiology with human physiology, that there is a brain, that there are electrical impulses firing that make these things happen, that then you're in a part of the universe where that can actually be read and understood. So there is a mechanism by which the thoughts are firing in the brain, leaving the brain, for lack of a better word, and then being manifested, then being built into a physical reality, whether that is by another being or whether that is by simply the physics of that area where that happens. That's what sort of made me maybe have questionable thoughts about this episode that I'll get into more when we do our wrap up. But then that really made me think about Data. Well, if Data's brain is just so much positronic firing of electrons, if he is capable of abstract thought, then not only could he manifest some truly interesting and bizarre things in this part of the universe, he could essentially do a better job than the Traveler. He could manifest all of the physics necessary to get them back.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know that he would do a better job than the Traveler. I think that they become a pair at that point. Because if you can go ahead and get Data to believe in the Traveler then becomes like, what's that thing from the Avengers? Like the Tesseract. I mean, the Traveler then becomes sort of like this conduit of unlimited power, because Data has no choice but to believe what is true, right? I mean, that's the way his robot brain works right now, we assume. And now the one thing is, he wants to be more human. It actually would have been an interesting turn had we come back to the bridge and seen a flesh and blood Brent Spiner sitting there.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, being an android, he does have maybe he has subroutines written for, like, okay, well, this is my time for abstract thought. Right. And it just happened to not be that time when they were in, the Haywire universe. Well, and given the order, he could turn it off. I mean, I guess that's the thing about Data's brain. Yeah, but he could direct everything to one thought. You would have to know who it was, though. I mean, because you're right, he could be ordered to turn it off, but would he order himself to turn it off? I mean, if it's time for the, crazy fun thought. Right. Well, it's interesting. I mean, you gave him, you used the word belief. Data would have to believe in the reality around him. Well, know it. Yeah, exactly. Data would have to trust that the reality that he sees is reality, and Data presumably has better ways of testing that than our limited human abilities. Data has desire to be human. Right. So whether or not that desire then is something that could be read and manifested, I agree with you. That could have been a really cool shot if there is a flesh and blood Lieutenant Commander Data for a moment. And then how do you get him back? I'm beginning to want Star Trek the next generation to actually center on a Traveler. I mean, there are really a lot of fascinating ideas, and I don't know if there is going to be a Star Trek the next generation. I certainly hope they come up with a better name for it than that. Yeah. But there's a lot to play to There's a lot to play with here.
Sorry, I've spent a lot of time this episode talking about me, rather than the crew of the Enterprise and their enigmatic guest, the Traveler. I guess I'm just a little out of phase. See? I am paying attention.
I say there's a lot to play here with, and we took it out, we played with it, and I don't know. We got to see what they made of Where No One Has Gone Before. This is the part in the episode where we decide whether what they made was worth anything, where we take it apart from messages, morals, and meanings and try to figure out whether or not the episode holds up. I put it to you, Mr. Champion. Does Where No One Has Gone Before hold up?
I really went back and forth on this one. I liked it. I didn't like it. I liked it. I didn't like it. I think I've landed at a place where I like it. And now after our discussion, I respect the episode more. First of all, from a production angle, it is made very well. I complained about some of the previous episodes where I felt like the editing, the production values, a lot of it was very sloppy. This is not a very sloppy episode. This is well done. We got some great effects. I feel like in the end, this is a very likable episode that I like, but I don't love. And I see how there are people who could really love this episode. I think the character of the Traveler is great. I think the character of Kosinski is interesting, if only to shake things up. He's a bit two-dimensional, but why not mess with the crew dynamic by introducing somebody like him? And I like that there are moments about Wesley that are gained from this. I like the scale of the universe that we see here, and I like the mystery of the great beyond, and even just the mind-blowing imagery that we get. Like you said, Picard on the turbolift just stands out to you and is such an indelible image and says so much about the character. I love that. In the end, I think the problem that I have with it is that this is Tinkerbell. And I am a big fan. I am a big fan of Peter Pan. One of the first professional theater gigs that I had was being in Peter Pan. I got mad love for Peter Pan. But if this episode comes down to, if you only believe strong enough and you clap your hands, we'll make the Enterprise fly again. Maybe that's not necessarily the message I want from it. It's just sort of a conceit to get them out of there. So that's where I part ways with the episode. What about you, Ken?
I surprised myself how much I ended up liking this episode. Here's where I will start. And Star Trek did not quote Shakespeare, but I will.
Okay.
There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. I like the idea that they were saying, everything that we know, okay, we don't actually know everything. Now, they're still going to do it. I mean, they're still doing it. It's pseudoscience, okay? I know we bumped into a few scientists at the convention who would probably laugh their heads off at me. But, I mean, they do the pseudoscience thing enough where they're like, oh, it's like magic. And he's like, yeah, I could see where you would think it's magic. It's not really magic, but it's so far beyond you that,
right.
Yeah. I like the fact that they're showing us something. Because think about it. In the 60s, when TOS was on, there was so much that we didn't know. We learned so much in those 20 years. And you will occasionally, today as we record in the early 2000s, I have come across people who are like, technology has gone as far as it can. And I'm always both amused and horrified when people say that, because it's just like, no, we've just gone as far as you can. And so I like the idea that even though it's not anything that we can codify, that we can look at and say, well, I understand exactly how this, I think about it, and suddenly it appears on the bridge thing works. I like the fact that they were trying to present something that was like, yeah, there's so much more that we don't get yet. Now, I mean, the sort of Peter Pan, Tinkerbell maneuver is a bit woo-woo, but if you take it out of the realm of the pseudoscience or the self-help parlance or faith, or however you want to say it, magic, as we record this today, we can't get on the same page. We can't get on the same page politically in the U.S. We can't get on the same page politically globally in the U.S. We can't get on the same page as far as, climate change, pollution, whether or not the whales are worth saving. We're dealing with factions in just about every part of. I had a great conversation with someone, with a Canadian, when we were at the expo in Vegas one time. And she wanted to know about our healthcare system and what the deal was with the U.S. healthcare system. And I said, I really don't want to have this discussion, because there were other people there. I was like, I really don't want to have this discussion because I don't want to talk politics. Mm-hmm. And she said, why is talking about health talking politics? And it's a fascinating idea, but guess where we are?
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, the idea of let's all get behind this one idea. Let's all work for the thing that's going to be good for everybody. I mean, that's really what that whole Peter Pan thing boils down to in this episode to me. I mean, everybody's been afraid of something. Everybody's been running from something. Everybody's been trying to figure something out. Kosinski's been trying to sort of up his own street cred or space lane cred, or however you want to say it. And what the whole thing comes down to, what the whole episode hinges on, is let's work together. Mm-hmm. Come on, let's work together. Because, it is a music reference, so I can't help but do that. So, I mean, that to me makes this episode just absolutely fantastic. And then there are just a million other messages in it. I mean, the dangers of cult of personality, like we talked about with Kosinski. He is exactly where he is because he has presented himself as, I'm the guy who can do that. And nobody's even stopped to go, well, is he really? And then the people who have stopped to do that, well, the problem is their perception is colored by the traveler, of course, because, right. I mean, his stuff has worked to this point, except, of course, it turns out it hasn't actually worked. I found it interesting that we have a godlike creature who, for the first time ever, with the exception of Q, but even Q is sort of like, Q's like, okay, you better watch your step, because I'm out here, right? We have a godlike creature here who's like, well, look at you guys. You're kind of interesting. In the original series, it was always, you guys will be interesting in a few years or a few hundred years or a few thousand years. Please don't call us. We'll call you when we care what you have to say. And then we come across somebody who's not godlike in the, Trelane's parents kind of way, but godlike in the, hey, you want to see what I can do? Mm-hmm. Who's saying, yeah, no, you guys are kind of hip. You're onto some stuff. So yeah, why don't we talk? You talked about the commissioning at the end. It's fantastic what happens at the end of the episode. And again, what we're getting there is, first of all, we're going to go ahead and grow the Wesley character. We are now getting the idea that there's going to be some kind of arc that's going to happen, because this guy has come to Picard and said, watch that kid. Seriously, watch him, because some really great stuff is going to happen. Now, he could have warned him that some really bad stuff is going to happen, too. Right. But, he's like, watch that kid, because that's going to be awesome. And I love the whole thing about, should we call his mother? I mean, it's a wonderful, that's a wonderful scene. That might be the best scene in the whole episode, actually. Just the interplay between Riker and Picard and Wesley. I mean, even though it's not necessarily as well acted as you might want it to be from Will Wheaton's, from Will Wheaton's end. It's just an absolutely fantastic scene. I would actually I would completely opposite what you're saying. This would have been, to me, an excellent pilot. In the same way that the Man Trap, we didn't start in the Man Trap going, well, I'm captain of the ship and I got this guy and here are these people and I got this new guy coming in. We were just in the middle of the Man Trap.
Right.
And when I'm watching this episode, I'm thinking, look, everybody is just firing on all cylinders. We don't have the, well, here's who I am and here's why I am. We understand that Tasha's life is awful from that 10 seconds that we get of her there with her cat and those guys, screaming at her and coming after her. And that's so much better than the minute. It feels like a minute. It's probably only 15 seconds of her yelling at Q about how bad her life was and how much better it is now. Right. If they weren't going to do Q, if they weren't going to do Encounter at Farpoint, this to me, this might be. This feels like Star Trek. This feels like not Star Trek that's trying to be Star Trek, not Star Trek that is introducing itself to everybody, not Star Trek that's trying to justify itself in what is suddenly canon because it just used to be a TV show and a few movies, and now it's now it's going to be a thing. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a thing that keeps going. This does not feel like something that's trying to justify its existence in that. This feels like Star Trek to me. Is it the best episode ever? No. Is it the most exciting episode ever? No. But I mean, this to me is a great episode.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's something in here about how we don't have a bad guy. We don't have a war we have to go to. We have pure exploration. not just in the sense of where the ship is going, but how we work together. I'll come back to that point. Like I said, where I parted ways with the episode is sort of the Tinkerbell element. Just clap your hands and think hard enough, and we'll save the ship.
Tinkerbell element, by the way, worst episode of Star Trek ever.
Right. But that's me taking the episode at face value of what actually happens in the episode. I come back around to it, and what I really like about it is this sort of message that I can glean from it. Our thoughts are powerful. Like as you are so fond of quoting the lawyer in the shower curtain, as you believe, so shall you do.
Oh, wait a minute. You said it wrong. As you believe, so shall you do. So shall you do. So shall you do.
Yes. Yeah.
Power of threes, dude. Come on. It's not just thought. It's thought triplicate.
I believe Picard says it's chaos. What we think is what happens. And metaphorically, this is where I'm back on board with this episode. That has more to do with changing our attitudes and changing our point of view rather than just speaking to some kind of woo nonsense. So, yeah, I can leave the woo nonsense of this behind, and I can say that if there's a message here hidden in that science fiction metaphor, then that message is we have to start thinking in a way that asks all of us to work together to achieve better things. You hit the nail on the head with so many points that are sort of current political hot topics. But even if you take it beyond that, what are we doing with our space program? What are we, how do we envision the kinds of cities that we live in, and how do we take care of each other and all of this stuff? Yes, we have to decide that we will think those things through and try to push as much of that chaos out as we can. Because if we don't, then we will continue to live in chaos. So, yeah, as far as a message goes, that's where I love this episode in that way. I'd also say some other messages that I picked out here. Don't be so anxious to throw your invention in someone's face. Kosinski. Experiment, share your data, collaborate, don't be a Kosinski. Nobody likes a Kosinski.
I'm sorry.
You don't want to be that guy.
When you say don't throw your invention in people's face, you're talking about an actual invention, right?
Yeah. Well, okay. I'm talking about an attitude.
Okay.
Well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough.
But listen to the people around you. That was a lesson for Riker to actually take seriously the opinions and the information he's getting from others, namely Wesley. And Wesley's vindicated at the end of this in a great way.
Yeah. I agree.
So I would say that all of those messages and more, what you picked out, they definitely hold up, and that makes the episode better than maybe it appears at first glance.
Hey, you with the earbuds. What do you think? Did you pick up messages, morals, and meanings that you would like to share with us? Do you think I'm crazy? Do you think John's crazy? Or do you think John's crazy? There are a number of ways to get in touch with us: Facebook, Skype, and Twitter. The handle is Mission Log Pod. You can call us 323-522-5641. Email us missionlog@roddenberry.com. Got a great place for you to check out online. That is missionlogpodcast.com. And if you find yourself at trekmovie.com, well, by golly, we're there too. Remember, we may use your comments on an upcoming episode of Mission Log.
And next week, there is more Next Gen to come. It is Lonely Among Us.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com, and from the album Messages by Key Theory, free to download at kitheory.com. Don't completely forget about writing to missionlog@roddenberry.com to say something nice about the computer. End transmission.